We're a nonprofit organization dedicated to eradicating human slavery, human trafficking, child exploitation, and child sexual abuse material through disrupting networks and applying data, technology, and advanced analytics and intelligence.
Welcome to the discussion on pig butchering. I'm John Bridge. I am going to moderate a panel with some experts in this area. We've got Matt Friedman, Mina Chiang, Erin West, and Larry Cameron. I'll introduce everyone and then we'll kind of get into a discussion on this growing crime. I'm John Bridge. My background is in government. I spent 25 years with the U.S. Marshal Service before I retired in 2019, and I currently serve as president of government security with Trafficking, which is a biometric AI company. Erin, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you so much, John. My name is Erin West. I'm a deputy district attorney in Santa Clara County, California. I, for the past 8 years, have worked with the REACT task force. That's a high-tech group of investigators. We cover 5 counties around San Jose and San Francisco, California. And I've been working pretty intently on these financial grooming pig butchering scams over the past 1.5 years.
Mina?
Hi everyone, my name is Mina Chiang. I'm the founder and director of Humanity Research Consultancy, HRC. HRC, we are a social enterprise based in the UK that focus on countering human trafficking and modern slavery. And in the last few months, we've been also quite active in advocating more higher awareness about this issue around the slaveries and in the skimming compound, and also been working very closely with government agencies, including in Taiwan and other places. Thank you.
Matt?
Hello, my name is Matt Friedman. I'm the CEO of an organization called the Mekong Club. We're based in Hong Kong. We work with the private sector in a positive, supportive, non-naming and shaming way to help them to understand the nexus between modern slavery, human trafficking in their businesses. This includes the banks, the retailers, the manufacturers, hospitality sector. Our kind of connection to this is we work with a lot of financial institutions that are very interested in understanding what this scam human trafficking thing is and how to address it.
And Larry?
You're on mute.
Hey, I'm Larry Cameron, Chief Information Security Officer at the Anti-Human Trafficking Intelligence Initiative. I'm also the blockchain forensics lead for National Child Protection Task Force. I'm a trainer at Interpol and computer forensics professor at St. Lawrence College and head of cyber at the Cyber Rights Organization. So essentially, I'm the tech and security guy. I like to invent things. I like to do quite a bit for ATII. I run the task force. I train law enforcement. We'll be training up to 5,400 agencies this year, next year, on dark web intelligence, blockchain forensics, and open source intelligence.
Excellent. So as we go through this panel, I'm going to use different terminology. Pig butchering is really a crime that consists of multiple crimes. So on the US side, the victim side, we have people that are involved in investment scams. So I refer to that as financial grooming. You may hear some other terms as well. And then on the source side, there's a human trafficking and labor trafficking component. So you may hear slavery, human trafficking, labor trafficking terms to kind of refer to that half of that crime that fits into this broader perspective. With that in mind, Erin, I'd like to kind of ask you to lead off and discuss, give us kind of an overview of this.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about this. What we're seeing in Santa Clara County and nationwide, even worldwide, is a complete financial devastation of victims. And the way it's being perpetrated worldwide is our victims will be will be, I'm calling it picked off from a dating site or LinkedIn or Instagram or a random WhatsApp text message. And from those platforms, they will be contacted and a relationship of some sort will begin. Often it's a romantic relationship. Sometimes it's a mentoring relationship, but primarily what the focus is on building a trusted relationship over a period of time. And during that period of time, which can be a month or more, the perpetrator, the scammer, is laser focused on building a trusted connection and at that same time determining exactly how much money that victim has. Because the nature of this specific crime is that it does not stop until they have taken every last penny from the victim. That's what really distinguishes it from other romance scams, is this one is really meant to figure out the wealth and to take it completely. The nature of the con is that over time this scammer is showing an enviable lifestyle and then later says, oh, I'm able to afford this because I invest in crypto. And I didn't know how to do that either, but my uncle trained me and my uncle could train you. The victim then begins investing a small amount at a time, and the scammer at that point knows what a small amount is to that particular victim. The scammer will show them false returns. They're essentially putting their money directly into the scammer wallet, but they don't realize that because they are being shown a platform that makes it appear that they are experiencing astronomical increases in value. And that increase in value, the endorphins that are brought from all of a sudden becoming wealthy, combined with this trusted relationship that feels so good, the victim is lured into more and more investments until the victim is run dry. They will liquidate 401ks. They will liquidate children's college accounts. But the clincher, and this is what is so horrible about this, is when the victim tries to withdraw any money, that's when the scammer says, oh, well, you need to pay taxes on that. And that has to be new money. And then our victims are taking out loans against their houses, borrowing money from anybody they can get their hands on because they think this is going to be a quick turnaround and they'll be super wealthy. And so that's when the victim realizes that this is all a scam and they've lost literally everything they have. And the devastation of this cannot be understated. I know a lot of people would like to characterize this as, just a fraud case, but we're seeing victims completely, having to check themselves into psychiatric facilities. We've seen suicides. The desperation and devastation of the financial victim, it's not just the finances, it's the loss of trust. They've lost this relationship and they've lost all their money, and that leads them to horrific results. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about it.
No, that's excellent. And the devastation, when we think of the devastation of the victims here, a lot of times we do have a sort of a crime-centric, I do personally as well, when I think of the victim here in the U.S. But this crime really victimizes a lot of people. And Matt, I know you have a lot of insight into the human trafficking aspect or the labor trafficking. So how does this differ from when we think about trafficking? A lot of times our mind goes to like sex trafficking or other types of trafficking, and we don't always realize the devastation that can happen on the trafficking side as well. So can you kind of give us some insight into what sets this apart?
Well, I mean, there are other parts of the world that have scam agencies that actually pay people, and people are willing to basically accept money for this. My kind of description of what I had heard related to this was during COVID, you had a lot of criminals that were in quarantine, and they basically couldn't go out and rape and pillage. And so they came to realize that if you ask every 10th person to lie about something, you can get them to give you money. So they're saying, wow, okay, look, we got 10 of us, we can earn a certain amount of money. Then they said, okay, well, let's hire a bunch of people to help us out. It happens in other parts of the world. they couldn't find a lot of Asians that wanted to do this. And so they said, okay, well, let's bring them here to Cambodia or to Myanmar and one of these other places. Then when they get there, we'll have a conversation with them. They'll kind of eventually agree to go and do this. And when they bring them in and the person says no, they said, okay, well, you're not going to leave. Okay. And so what you generally see with sex trafficking is kind of a criminality, and there's violence and everything else. But much of what you see in forced labor around the world related to supply chains and so forth doesn't have that same criminal feel. But this particular crime does. If you don't basically get a certain amount of money, you get beaten, you get tortured, you get tasered, horrible things happen to you. And we've seen this go to the extent of actually having a person be murdered. We see that these people are actually sold from one place to another. And when basically one of these centers, there's pressure from governments to go and do arrests and rescue kids and so forth, it pops up someplace else. And so what we have here is a new phenomenon. You have the scamming crime, you have the human trafficking crime that combined together, you now have a spotted zebra. You have a hybrid of crimes that really does pay out. And, when I was working on addressing sex trafficking, pimps would often say, if you get a girl and you put her in a room and you just maintain her, it's like an ATM machine because she keeps giving and giving and giving. So it's different from drug trafficking where you take the drugs and move them and sell them, and you got to do that over and over again. They say the same thing about this. Get a person, put them in front of a machine and force them to basically do this. And this is going to result in lots of money being generated, but that person is going to suffer greatly. I'll just say one more thing before I hand it over. And that is my son's an emergency room doctor. And when somebody comes in and dies, he's the guy who has to go and basically say to the family, your loved one passed. I have bankers who are now going and saying to family members who have lost everything that you lost everything and you're not going to get it back. And they say it's almost like that emergency room doctor because of the devastation that goes along with that particular statement. All of their money plus a loan on top of that. You talk about wanting to really destroy an individual and a family, that's the way to do it.
Wow, that's really impactful. One of the things you mentioned, Matt, are these centers. And Mina, I know you have a lot of on-the-ground experience. So can you kind of talk to us about how this is facilitated and kind of give us some in-depth knowledge about these centers?
Of course, yeah. So I'm going to share some of the pictures and images. Can you see my screen now? Yeah.
That's just coming up.
Yeah, here it is.
Right. So yeah, like Erin just mentioned, it's basically people being scanned, but on the other side of the screen is what Matt mentioned, people being like forced and teasered. I'm going to show some image. It's not going to be very pleasant. So if you feel uncomfortable, you can skip it. I will tell you when it's finished. These are kind of images that victims are sending us, survivors sending us. Some poems basically almost on a daily basis. People being like extremely tortured, and this is also a kind of another thing about this type of crime, that the violence what we have seen is in extreme level. I'm passing that slides now. So for example, because we did some like frontline rescues at some periods, so victims, they will directly send us out the GPS location so that we can locate them. And for example, they are actually coming from places like this, and that's the reason why we call them compounds, because they are just basically a series of buildings, sometimes 10 floors, sometimes 20 floors, full of offices, and you can see them directly on the satellite, and we know where they are because these are places we have brought out victims. For example, this is Boca Mountain. It's actually a luxury, like a hotel and kind of a national resort places, but now it's being turned into a criminal place. These two images are in Myanmar, and so you can also see that on the right-hand side, it's called Tachili. This is area that's very close to the airport, 10 minutes from there, and we have seen lots of African victims being brought to Myanmar and being exploited in this area. On the left-hand side, this is close to the Thai border called the Myanmar, also a very, very notorious criminal place. We have heard about trafficking of organs and even weapons in this area as well. And we have talking about that. When I say victim, I mean victims of trafficking. They are really from everywhere, like more than 20 countries we have seen so far. Initially, media reports mainly focusing on like Southeast Asia and Asia in general, but now we have realized, for example, they are also victims from Africa, from Brazil, from Central Asia. I personally also met 2 American victims who being like put in the scamming compounds and being forced to do this work and being like tortured as well. We have also seen, for example, this kind of a crime is just kind of mind-blowing level of size because, for example, crypto scams in 2021 it hit a record of 14 billions. Of course, we don't know if all of these are conducted by scammers. It could be also by different type of institutions, not necessarily in the compounds. But basically, you can imagine like how huge it is. And every year we are seeing a rise in these kind of crypto scams. And also, for example, victims will share this kind of scripts with us, like what they have to say when they message people on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on like different kind of dating websites, to tell them how great they are, personality-wise, they're taking care of their parents, their pets, their children, and they are like making great money, having a fantastic lifestyle. I will even share with you, like this is something, for example, a link. You can just basically see on my screen the link. You can go and search by yourself also. This is a platform that scammers are sharing quote-unquote materials that they use to scam others, including like luxury pictures, including some IDs they can use when they scam others as well. And as I mentioned, you know, it's basically just like offices. You basically just need internet and electricity that you can start doing this and forcing people to be in the compound. And what we are also seeing is that they have a very detailed, very kind of a style of like division of work. So for example, you will see local authorities in Cambodia and Myanmar basically sheltering and protecting those criminals. They are compound owners who are more like a landlord, so they are providing the space and the buildings. And then after that, there will be like different quote-unquote company owners, which is like different groups. One company may be like focusing on, let's say, American market, which is scamming Americans. The other one may be focusing more on kind of Chinese market or Singapore market, and then using different kind of techniques. And they are paying that kind of a high rent to the compound owners, to their landlords. Then you will also see, for example, inside the company, they'll be very detailed, like for example, every team have 10 people, and then the supervisors. Then beyond that, of course, they are collaborating with the trafficking groups so that they can, for example, lure victims from Kenya, from Ethiopia, from Taiwan to join those compounds. There will be, of course, also money laundering service, so they are able to use those money for their leisure. And just here, I'm going to show another 2 pictures. As Erin mentioned, like on the other side, for the victim who lost their money, it's people who commit suicide who are trying to, really recover from that loss of trust. But on the criminal side, many companies, they are putting this kind of instruments, and whenever they got like a million, get like a kind of 100,000, they are celebrating with this kind of instrument just to kind of saying that the client they win bigger money. And on the right hand side, also to show you. These kind of criminal compounds is really just beyond the financial side and the kind of slavery side, but they are also, for example, wildlife trafficking. For example, people buy and sell. I mean, the compound owners, since they have so much money, branded products not even special anymore. They are buy and sell like lions and tigers to show their status. They are also, for example, other kind of weapon traffickings, all kind of different crimes are happening in these kind of areas. I will stop here, but before I start, maybe just also to show, for example, I shared a few screenshots of the kind of satellite image of the compound, but really the compounds are in a way like beyond the ability to really detect all of them. And so far, for example, even just by what Victor told us, we have already identified lots of different compounds, and these are only just in Cambodia and Myanmar. But we also know there are compounds, for example, in Philippines, in Dubai, even though in those areas they are a little bit kind of less trafficking victims, but more kind of volunteers who voluntarily join this kind of a crime. But these kind of models can be replicated in other places. You just need a place that's like lack of rule of law, and the criminals can abuse other people by using those financial and ways online. I will stop here.
Excellent. When you talk about these compounds, I know ATII collected a lot of data on this, and so there's a way of actually looking at these from a data perspective as well. And Larry, I think you might be able to share some insight into that for us.
Yeah, actually, she talked about one of the compounds in Mayawati, if that's how you pronounce it. But I'll share my screen here. I'll show you some different things we've been researching. So we've been looking at the crypto apps they've been using too. So they have a lot of tokens that they generate as well that they scam people with. Screen 2. Is that it? Nope. Sorry, stop presenting. I can edit this out. Screen 1. Nope. Sorry, screens aren't numbered here. There it is. All right. So we've been looking into, so there's sex trafficking, labor trafficking, and organ trafficking. You can see some of the ads that we can collect on social media. Just go to Facebook, search Myanmar casino and job, and you're going to get a whole bunch of groups and stuff. So let's see. So this is when I first started looking at the compound. What I did a social geolens. And what that does is kind of hones in on a certain location and looks for matches for social media posts in that specific area. So this one was just beside KK Park, but you'd see the first one here that there was a military coup. So that's the military actually overthrew the government. This guy is the one that owns the compound that everything's happening. His name is Shi. This guy is part of the Myanmar military. They also own a company called ATII. So these guys have a 30% stake in this pig butchering compound owned by this guy. So going through, we can find some ownership breakdown. We actually see that this ATII group is, well, look, state or government owned. There's a certain percentage. So it goes pretty high up here. The infrastructure here, it's increasing. You can see new developments are in red, cell towers, new ramp crossings, and official border bridges. Now here's where we get into the data. So the compound, what I did is geofence the specific area. So what I wanted to see there is what are the signals coming from devices that are connecting to either cellular network or Wi-Fi access points. I found quite a few networks in there. I can zoom in here. It's a big list here. Mitel, OVH and Cloudflare, China Mobile, Amazon. You'll see. That's sometimes when they use a proxy or a VPN. That's why they're getting those IPs. So they're going through this infrastructure. Some of the Amazon servers and the M247 are in Florida. So I'm sure a lot of people would like to know about that. Did you guys hear about the GOJ? They I think it was 112 million that they seized. Oops. So we'll go into the data now, and I'll show you the geofence. So this is Thailand on this side, and then you'll see the little river here, and that's the border, and below it's Myanmar. So we can actually filter out IP address assignments. So these would be based on who they're provided to the ISP. So Thailand, Myanmar, Hong Kong, US, ZZ, wherever that is, SG might be Singapore. And you'll see that the majority of them are in Thailand. But right down below the border is where most of the heat map is. So I can filter based on Myanmar, and you'll notice that every single one of these dots, they're on the Myanmar side of the border. And I went around near Cambodia and other countries just to check this out, because there was an article that They raided a telecommunications building in Thailand. And what they were doing, it was state-owned, so Thailand government owned it. But people were bringing it across the border, the internet cables. There was a suspected 10,000 internet lines that were strung across. So this was providing a lot of bandwidth for the scammers. They were also, geolocated to another country. So right here is when I geofence Thailand, or filtered by the Thailand IP addresses. So you see here Myanmar, you'll see here Thailand and Myanmar. There's tons over here. So these would be most likely the illegal cross-border internet connections. So we hone in on these. We want to take a deeper look. We can see that it's all over the compound. You'll also see some really strange ones. Like, there we go. So once we zoom in, you'll see these little squares right here. And it's strange because they're not really moving and they're just a square. You see other ones that are moving. These are people with cell phone devices. You'll see this one right here. Like, they're just mainly in the same spot most of the time. One of the ISPs I was picking on was Campana. Oh, sorry about that. So Campana, they're a relatively new network that they put up around that area after they went from Cambodia. So this compound that was owned by Xi, it was in Cambodia first, but then United Nations, there was a lot of international pressure. So it kind of forced them to act. So after that, they had a lot of raids. They moved to Myanmar, they moved to Thailand, and all the surrounding countries. So here's some of the filters we used for Campana. We got the Thailand, we got the ISP. We figure out what IP addresses are assigned to them. So then we can find out where these are. So you see in these little buildings. So chances are they ran this across the border. And then they ran it to these buildings. And you see this one? I was talking about the squares before. So that's an interesting heat map there. Here are the devices that were on the network, just Campana. I can filter these out. See, based on Thailand, this is the ASN number. This is the ISP. We're just basically filtering those so we can kind of check their infrastructure. And we know that this Campana, they only have one connection. They have one provider. Now this is interesting because it's relatively new. There's no fault tolerance. There's no redundancy. There is here. But these guys are getting their internet from here. So we can actually disrupt this connection through this company. We can just get them shut down. They have two connections. So if one goes down, they go to another. If I want to target from right here to the cloud hosting providers, I can just filter by Amazon, this M247, ZenLayer, Linode. There's tons of cloud hosting providers. You see all the VPN or proxy. So I'm able to get these coordinates based on GPS. So certain applications, they leak GPS data. So it doesn't matter what IP they're using, if they're using a VPN, if they're using Tor, I can still know where they are and where their IP address is. That's why this is really interesting here, because you can see where all their infrastructure is, the main infrastructure. That's right. See, this is the karaoke house. That's where they traffic women. Analyzing the IP addresses, just a simple IP lookup, and you'll see the providers. A lot of them are in Miami, Portland, Oregon, Las Vegas, Nevada. So these IP addresses are really, really important. I'll probably report them after this call, but we want to get these shut down. We want to get them disrupted. This is probably how they're hiding quite a bit, but You know, we already know the compound, we know their IP addresses, we know what infrastructure they're using, we know how many mobile providers they have, cellular networks. We know that they're bringing in the internet from Thailand to Myanmar. It's actually pretty technical there. How much time do we have left? Here's more information on some of the software they're using. They actually got the software in the Apple store and also the Android one, Play Store. So you'll see this app got in there, but it's more difficult to get it into the Apple one. So they use their own apps because, well, they're essentially, once you install it, they can install malware. We also found more information. Well, this is one of the crypto addresses. So we took the crypto address, we did blockchain forensics on it. But the interesting part was the tokens. So if you go through these tokens, you notice most of them don't have a price, no change. So they're not listed on the exchange. There's no market for them. But you'll see ones like Credit DeFi or Bitcratic. So I did an analysis of all these different coins. We're able to see a lot of them are shut down. One of them is a decentralized exchange. Those are great for, they're not really compliant. They don't get KYC. You just do trades from order books. This one was not online. This one was DeFi, so decentralized finance. We had one phishing site. We had one that tried to drop malware. A lot of them weren't up anymore. So these sites, so it's probably the scammers' infrastructure. We also got quite a bit of information on the other one. So this one, well-known addresses, so spam or phishing. So there's quite a bit of spam and phishing in these. They probably give you fake coins just to make it look like you're getting something. Not really sure all their tactics. I just found it. I didn't do any forensics on this, but you know, the only ones that were legit were the Ethereum and the Tether. So they have about 15,000 in this wallet.
Larry, I want to backtrack a little bit because
Yep.
one of the things that you said earlier in your portion of this presentation seemed to deal with like the recruiting. So when we're talking, we're really talking about two crimes. We're talking about the crime in the U.S. and then we're talking about the trafficking component. So going back to like the origins of the trafficking component, I know Mina touched on it a little bit as well. Are they using websites, or what is the process for actually recruiting the victims of this crime?
So they can do it on WhatsApp. They post a lot on social media. So Facebook, I've seen a whole bunch on LinkedIn. So that would be up here, I believe. But they're on Facebook, they're on LinkedIn, they're on WhatsApp. A lot of them are dating sites. So it's not just one scam. They're doing a romance scam. They're doing crypto investments. Here's some of the ones. So and then they target them for the recovery scammers as well.
Yeah, let me backtrack a little bit. I'm talking more about recruiting the people that are working in these call centers. So before we get into the U.S. side of the crime, so they're using this to actually recruit the trafficking victims as well.
Yep.
Okay.
Just posts or Tinder. Any social media, they're using quite a few. I've seen multiple different lists on different sites. So it could be just based on the country, whichever one they use the most. But they even have fake documents for fake paperwork. Here's different ad. This one was LinkedIn.
So ZMO generally promises of work.
Yeah.
John, what we hear in some cases is that they'll even have a job interview, where they'll have a Zoom meeting, and it really looks very legit. You can go to Cambodia, you can get $5 a month. You can do it for a couple of months. You can do it for longer. You don't have to have any previous experience. Tell us about yourself. Give us some basic information, and everything seems very upfront and legitimate until they get the report, and then taken off to the site, and then all of a sudden their life changes.
Yeah, they have a really good salary. And I also noticed you get meals, you get a raise after every month. I mean, there's so many perks listed in there that who would say no?
So
Can
when I
also
think about this,
share-
for,
Hi,
I'm
Sean.
sorry, Mina, go
So
ahead.
share a little bit more on this. So from what we have known, there are actually like 5 major ways of recruitment. The first one is what we discussed a lot, which is like through kind of legal, legit, primary job websites like LinkedIn, advertising a regular job, and just lure people to Cambodia, to Myanmar, and then you can just confiscate their passport and lend it. The other way is through, like also we mentioned, social media, Facebook. But then there's also another way, which is through personal networks. So for example, some of the victims describe when they arrive at the compound, they were actually being put into like human resource department, and then they were being asked to recruit their friends. So usually for if you are being put in the scammer side, then you are being asked to scan a certain amount of money per month. But then when you are in the kind of human resource side, then they're asking you, bring your high school friends, bring your university friends. So that's particularly scary, because when your old friend reach out to you and say, hey, I'm having a fantastic life in Cambodia and Myanmar, come join me, it's very hard to say no, because it's someone you know, there's a trust in here. And also we heard some situation that the criminals posed as like they need a certain specific service. So for example, they need architecture, they need interior designer, they need magicians. So when they come to you and saying, hi, like please come here because we need some like annual event, we need magicians to come and perform, then it feels like, very, very legit and very genuine. So there's also another way. We also see people like being just directly kidnapped on the street, particularly some of the Westerners. For example, like Russian couples, they were just having their honeymoon and being kidnapped to the compound. We have also noticed, for example, when it comes to Chinese victims, many of them are actually from rural areas, so they are never, really from kind of like main cities, and so they are indeed from kind of economically slightly more disadvantaged places, and many of them are being like smuggled from the border from China to Vietnam and back and to Cambodia. However, when it comes to victims of other nationalities, like for example Taiwan or like Malaysia or like African victims, many of them are actually quite like professional in the way they have their university degree. They know how to, read and write really great. Some of them speak more than one languages. And we even met some like engineers who were like being forced to write codings in the compound as well. So that's also one of the reasons why the compound can have really high tech. It's not necessarily everybody's like voluntarily improving their systems, but some of the victims are being put to I have one victim telling me like he was being forced to kind of like alleviate it and like maximizing the use of, for example, fake phone numbers so they can scam Americans, and without the kind of Google Voice account being like suspended, because if you keep sending the same messages, they will be suspended. So similar kind of stories. Thank you.
Right. When I think about disruption in this area, so I'm hearing a lot. Among the things I'm hearing are like legitimate websites like LinkedIn, social media websites like Facebook, personal referrals, maybe a little bit harder to interdict. With cryptocurrency, depending on how it's being deployed, could be a potential disruption point. And then the telecoms and also hosting like AWS and some of those others. So there are a lot of stakeholders that I think could be involved in this. And then one of probably the most important areas for disruption would be education, which I know on the trafficking side, there's been some campaigns. But before we go into the trafficking side, I want to come back to the victim side in the US and really give Erin an opportunity to talk about Operation Shamrock and how the disruption can be tied to that operation.
Thank you so much for asking me about that. So I had been studying what had happened internationally because I was so offended by not only the victimization of the financial victims, but the victimization that you guys have described this morning. And I have to tell you, what you've told me today is even more horrifying and even more information than I've known in the past. But I think particularly what Larry and Mina are bringing to the table are opportunities for us to disrupt. So my Operation Shamrock campaign is 3 parts, like the 3 leaves of a clover, and it's educate, seize, disrupt. And I think we can all agree that education is a major way that we are going to be able to be helpful in this regard. And for me, that's educating law enforcement. It's about how to help our victims in the United States and abroad. It's educating current victims that they're actually in a scam and educating them about getting that immediately reported so that somebody can take a look at it. And it's educating future victims so that they don't fall victim to the same scam. Seize is all about, thank you, Larry. Seize is all about how we're going to be able to assist our victims. I'm 100% victim focused in terms of providing an opportunity for victims to be heard locally and feel like they're getting assistance. And if we can talk to them quickly enough that we can locate some of their assets and seize them, then I'm all for that. And I am very busy educating law enforcement on how to make that happen. We've been successful in that in Santa Clara County. We've returned over $1 million to 10 different victims, and we are looking to have a judge order more back to victim this week. So that's part of what we're looking for in seize. But what I've really heard on this call that I'm super excited about, and I'm really interested in pursuing further conversations with everybody on this call, is the opportunity to really disrupt their infrastructure. For me, the disruption, firstly, it has got to come from the platforms that are allowing these predators access to our victims. And as I've learned on this call, not only allowing them access to our victims, but allowing them access to the victimization in terms of the human trafficking side. I didn't realize that so many of the solicitation of human trafficking victims was taking place on these platforms as well. So I'm very interested in working with those platforms to get the scam profiles off of them. And I think that Larry and Mina have provided us with some really actionable information about disrupting their infrastructure. And my Shamrock Coalition is about the kind of opportunity we're seeing on the call this morning, that how can we work together instead of doing all of this in silos and each working separately about what's happening? How can we band together and maximize our impact? How can we use there are other people in the United States doing the same type of research that you guys are doing. How can we blend that together and really scale it to be able to make a very massive difference in shutting this down in the United States and otherwise? This is definitely a worldwide problem, and I appreciate that so much. So that's what Shamrock is all about. It's all about bringing people together so that we're not doing this all independently. We've got a massive worldwide crisis here. We have a human rights crisis in so many levels. We are literally handing over generational wealth from all across the world and putting it in the hands of organized crime and state actors. And there's no other choice but to band together and work on this together. So that's what Shamrock is all about.
Excellent. And with that in mind, Mina, I want to give you an opportunity to kind of just address the disruption component from the trafficking.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And definitely, I feel really excited to hear what Erin said and what everybody, put on the table. It's just, that's what we really needed. I mean, for me personally, I think this is it's such a new trend of crime, but also it's a mind-blowing scale of crime. Like basically, we're talking about not tens of thousands of victims, but potentially even hundreds of thousands. Many of us frontline NGOs will agree it's actually hundreds of thousands of victims or scammers out there. Some voluntarily, some like victims of trafficking. And for me, I'm very much focusing on the kind of disrupting the criminal, because I mean, definitely we need to educate also the like kind of potential victims who might fall into the crime, but in the end we have like 6-7 billion people on the earth. There's always will be victims on both sides being scammed money and being lured into the compound. It's really important, really make sure the criminals cannot operate in the space of level of the rule of law. So what Erin mentioned also, like educating law enforcement body, I think that's really, really important. Like what we are seeing is that this is so too new to a degree that many law enforcement bodies are not aware of that, or like they know, but they just kind of shocked and don't know what to react. So that's one of a very important component. And I think recently, actually just like a few days ago in Taiwan, there's a really good news. Taiwanese government has finally, sentenced some criminals, and one of the criminals being sentenced for like 18 years of sentence. And that's only on the component of trafficking people from Taiwan to the compounds only, but not even, criminals in the compound directly. However, those compound owners, both owners and managers, they are having their wealth everywhere around the world. They are not buying mansions or like villas in Cambodia, Myanmar. No, they are having their properties in the States, in Australia, in the UK, in other places that they can enjoy their life nicely. And we actually know who they are. I mean, these are criminals. They're not even hiding their identity. Some of them even have like a charitable foundations on the other side, and kind of, having a front. It's a little bit like almost seeing like in the mafia, seeing in for example, Latin America, in the kind of drug trafficking settings. They're not hiding who they are. So why can't we try to, for example, confess their assets, or for example, list them some kind of like list, and making sure whenever they try again to fly to other countries, whenever they try to use the passport again to enter other places, they will be arrested. They will be, like there's some consequence there. For me, that's very much, I think, very important. And then I think we are very much, ready. There's actually lots of information out there. The important thing is just to really make sure that mechanisms works out, like convincing the key decision makers and making sure that can happen. Also, I would say that if it's very much, definitely the primary stakeholder here should be governments, but also beyond that, there will be, other kind of for example, NGOs and activists who are very much on countering trafficking and human rights. This is such a new trend of issues that many organizations haven't been able to react to it. They have their 3-year plan, 5 years master plan. They haven't been able to pick up this, but we really need more resources and coming to here and all collaborate together. So that's another kind of my message to like other type of organizations, UN organizations, Interpol, UNODC, to work more on this. And as also what Erin mentioned on kind of a victim center, on my side, I think Matt and I, we work very much with the survivors of human trafficking. And that's another part that I think a lot of survivors and victims, they come out from a compound. They are really the expert of the topic. They know exactly what kind of a platform they were being, forced to use. They know what kind of a process. And even these days, sometimes we have victims, they are still inside the compound. They're not able to come out yet, but they are inside the compound, and they tell us that they need, like, for example, law enforcement bodies in Japan, in like other certain countries, because some of the clients are about to be scammed, and they want to stop that. They didn't want to see people losing money, but it's very hard for them when we don't build that network. How are we going to come up with any, kind of law enforcement bodies around the world to stop that to crime? So I would say that's also treating the trafficking victim as expert and as our important allies, not just someone who we need to serve and protect, but someone who can also actively contribute. It's a very important message from my side. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm a strong advocate for empowering survivors to teach us the things that we need to know, because they're the real experts here. Matt, I wanted to turn it over to you for final comments before we have ATI take any questions.
Yeah, I mean, everyone heard the horrific elements of this. You're talking about violence, you're talking about torture, you're talking about murder, rape is involved, scams are involved, people losing all of their savings, people's lives are disrupted and so forth. If that's not terrorism, I don't know what terrorism is. This needs to be one of these things that's treated the same way terrorism, where, the laws of privacy and everything are adjusted in such a way that the reality of what we're dealing with is put front and center. We're dealing with something that is so egregious and so relevant and so important. And if we don't kind of nip this now, any Tom, Dick, or Harry is going to just basically realize they could just set up a couple of rooms in a house and force people from their house to just scam people. It's a terrible, horrible new criminal model that, if replicated, that could create all kinds of issues. And for this to go away, it really has to be the NGOs on the victim protection side, the financial institutions on the kind of analyzing the movement of money from a traditional account to cyber. If they see $10,000, $20,000 increments being taken out on a regular basis, that's something that you should be very suspicious of. And so they need to be involved in that. The social networking platforms that allow for this type of thing to happen. Law enforcement basically coming in, being trained on this. This is one of those times when we can't wait for this to be done over the next 6 months. We'll come up with some kind of an action plan. This has to happen now, immediately. And that's why, this type of information is so necessary, so important. But I almost kind of want to shake all of the participants who are watching this and help them to understand this needs to be done now. We can't wait on this, okay? Because if we do, we're going to find ourselves in a world where you just won't know if anything is real, because it'll just get further and further and deeper and deeper. And the moment you push something down, it pops up someplace else. And that's exactly what we're seeing with closing down in Cambodia, popping up in Laos, popping up in Myanmar. And we're seeing it in other countries and so forth. This is an emergency, it has to be addressed.
Excellent. I'd like to thank all the panelists. And as we kick this over to Q&A, I would just like to recognize that we have a lot of subject matter experts actually tuning in as well. So if there are solutions that can be offered as a result of this conversation, please feel free to weigh in with that as well. Thank you very much.